Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is your girl Gabriella once again with another video. If you've never been here before, thank you so much for stopping by. And if you have been here before, thank you for being a loyal viewer. Today, I'm gonna give you guys some pros and cons of living in New York City. I've lived here for 10 years now, and there's a lot that I've learned about New York. There's a lot that I'm still learning.
Yeah, keep it low key. Ain't no beefing with me. Live life drama free. Cause I got places to be.
I don't know what this is, but I like it. As always, I have to have my little jazz hip hop background music because it just gets me in the zone and it just sets the mood. So I wanted to shoot this video because when I first moved to New York, I did not know what to expect. I actually had no idea, and I was super culture shocked. Even though I had traveled to New York many times growing up, living here is a completely different story. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to start with the pros or the cons first, but I wanted to end the video on a positive note, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with the cons first. So the first con is high rent. Real estate in New York City is very expensive. Whether you're renting or you're buying, either way, it's gonna be expensive. When I say New York City, I mean the 5 boroughs, which is Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island, because on paper, Staten Island is one of the 5 boroughs, but I don't really consider Staten Island a borough. To me, it's like a own little, it's kind of like Long Island. Like, it's just another town in New York State, but I don't consider it the city just because it is very suburban, townish like. It's not really a city. But I don't know, maybe people that live in Staten Island feel differently, but most New Yorkers will tell you that we don't consider Staten Island a borough. I'm gonna say 4 boroughs right now, which is Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens. The average price for, let's say, a 1-bedroom apartment in one of these boroughs is about $2,000 a month. Depending on where you live within these 4 boroughs, you will find apartments that are way cheaper than that, and you also will find apartments that are way more expensive than that. If you want to buy a house, average cost of a house in New York City is like $600,000 to $700,000, which you would mostly find in Queens or Brooklyn. There are some houses in the Bronx too, like if you're more like up north. If you want a townhouse in Manhattan, now we're talking like millions of dollars. So that kind of gives you like an idea of how high New York City prices are. New York City is very crowded. And I'm talking about prior COVID-19. New York City is always crowded, no matter what borough you're in. If you're in Queens or Brooklyn, there are areas where it's more suburban-ish, more people driving, there's less people on the street. Overall, like, it's crowded on the trains, it's crowded on the street, it's crowded everywhere you go. It's gonna be crowded. If you're going to Times Square, it's always crowded. The 4th con is the rat, roach, and bed bug issue that we have in New York City. Like, if you live in the hood, it doesn't matter how clean your house is, you might see a roach or 2. Mice might come in your house because if you live in like a really old building, the mice live inside the walls. If you live in a pre-war building, that means it was built at the beginning of time when New York City was first like constructed. Mice are gonna be living in your walls.
Hey y'all, so as I'm sitting here editing, I realized that I forgot to mention a very important detail when it comes to the pests, the mice, and the roaches. What I was talking about in that last segment was pre-war buildings or old buildings that are generally in the hood, poor areas of New York City. Now, if you live in a pre-war building that's in a gentrified area or wealthier area with a wealthier demographic, like the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side, you're gonna really have this issue because it really depends on how the landlord executes fumigation. So if you live in a really wealthier demographic area, the landlord is gonna take better care of the building. It's really, really bad because it's like if you're poor and you live in the hood, the landlords really don't care that much. Like, they only really care about getting your money every month. But if you live in an area where there's a wealthier demographic, it's more gentrified, or there's more people that have money in that area, even if it's an old building, you're really gonna have the pest problem, because the landlord is gonna be on top of it. And also, if you live in a luxury building, like where you're paying $4, $5, $10,000 a month, you're definitely not gonna have this problem because you're living in a luxury building. So it really just depends on where you live, what the demographic is, and also it depends on the landlord and the super and how good of a job they do to make sure that the building stays pest free.
Now, if you live in a brand new building, you're not gonna have that issue because when they construct these new buildings, they're constructing them specifically to keep mice and roaches and all that stuff out. You'll see rats in the subways. There's this one video, oh my gosh, where there was this homeless man sleeping on the train and there was a rat in the train, not the subway platform, but inside the train, in the cart, and it was climbing up the man's leg. These rats ain't no, these rats are like this big. Like it's pretty bad. Bed bugs, like you really have to be careful when you go over people's houses. You know what I'm saying? Like you could easily, if you're clean, you could easily catch a bed bug. Next con is that New York City is always loud. It's a city that never sleeps. There's always people out. There's some businesses that are open 24 hours. There's always something to do. You know what I'm saying? Like whether it's 3 a.m. or 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, because of COVID, things are different. A lot of businesses have closed and just overall people are not out like that. People are not really on the streets like that. The next con is that New York City is the concrete jungle. Okay, you know that song by Alicia Keys and Jay-Z, Concrete Jungle, where dreams are made of? There's not a lot of like nature available. Like the most nature you can get is if you go to Central Park, or like a big park like St. Nicholas Park or Morningside Heights, or Cortona Park in the Bronx, which is the biggest park in the Bronx, and Van Cortlandt is really, really nice. There's a few really big parks, but there's not a lot of nature that you can get. So if you're the type of person like me, you know, I love the city, but at the same time, I really love nature. I really love the outdoors. I like going hiking. I like horseback riding. In order for me to do that, like I have to actually leave New York, or at least the 5 boroughs. Like if I go upstate, there's a lot of that, but within the city there's not much nature to be enjoyed. The last con is that New York City can get pretty lonely. It can be really hard, especially if you're just moving here and you don't know anybody like I did. New York City is one of those places where like you have different groups of friends. Like there's so many people. Like you could have a group of friends from work, and then you can have a group of friends from your church, and then you can have a group of friends from your school, and you can have a group of friends from like a dance class that you go to every week. Like there's so many people to meet all the time that there's potential to have a really big circle. But the thing about New York City is that everyone is always busy, everyone is always stressed out, everyone is always doing a lot. So sometimes, you know, your schedule can't really coordinate with somebody else's schedule. Like you really have to go above and beyond sometimes to get together with friends. Transitioning from like not knowing people to then knowing people and just making time to like be around your friends, it could be a little lonely sometimes, just because that's just how New York City is. I'm sorry, like if you're born and raised in New York, but a lot of the natives here, like they're not really that friendly. You know what I'm saying? Like New York City is a cutthroat city, and everyone's just hustling and bustling. Everyone's just out for themselves. Like that's just the reality of it. So if you want to move to New York City, I would suggest like really putting yourself out there and meeting new people. Just finding those people that you can really trust, because that could be kind of hard in New York City. Another con that I did forget, the crime here is pretty high. Now things have calmed down because of COVID-19. Especially if you're a woman, you have to really be careful at night, especially. There's been times where I've almost gotten robbed. There's one time where I almost got raped. It can get pretty hectic. I always tell women, especially, like have a taser or have some pepper spray or have something that you can carry on you at all times to make sure that you're safe. It could get a little dangerous, especially if you're in a neighborhood where it's not so good. Okay, so now on to the pros, which is my favorite part. Even though New York City can be really hard, it is also really amazing. I myself have had amazing opportunities here that I would have never dreamed of having if I would have stayed in Little Enfield, Connecticut, where I grew up. So the first is job opportunity. There are so many businesses, places, companies, like there's just so much available to you. Like if you don't make something out of yourself here, it's because you're lazy, to be honest with you, because there are so many opportunities. There are so many like career development programs. There's just so many opportunities that you can really dive into. Another pro is the music and art scene, the food, the nightlife. Like, there's just a lot to do. Like, you can never really get bored. There's also a lot of free events that you can go to. I remember one time I went to a free concert at Central Park. John Mayer and Alicia Keys were performing. In terms of food, there's every kind of food that you could imagine. Mexican, Italian, American, Korean, any type of Asian that you could think of. French, Brazilian, Latin food of every country that you could think of. Like, there's just so much to try. In reality, like, you really can't ever be bored. Now, I will say that for most of these things, you do need money. A lot of them are not super expensive, but even if you don't want to spend money, like, you could always go to like Chelsea Piers and like just sit there by the water and have like a coffee or a smoothie or have lunch. Like, there's so much to do. Next pro is public transportation. Now, me personally, I have my own thoughts about public transportation, but I will say that it's a cheaper way of getting around and traveling if you can't really afford a car, because having a car in New York City is hectic. Not just gas and insurance prices, but also the fact that driving here is crazy. The traffic in Manhattan sucks because every street in Manhattan is one way. So if you missed your turn, you need to go all the way to the next street to go that way, to come this way, to go back that way. Like, it's just crazy. Drivers here are very reckless, especially the yellow cabs. I cannot tell you how many times I've almost been run over or hit by a yellow cab driver. So if you're a yellow cab driver, come on, bro. Do better. So in reality, you don't really need a car to live here. I know a lot of people who had cars when they moved here and then they ended up selling their car because it was just kind of like paying another massive bill that they weren't really using. Public transportation does come in handy. The next pro is the diversity in New York City. I love it because you will never feel like you're an outsider. So many different people from so many different backgrounds, ethnicities, cultures, so many different languages are spoken here. Like, you can meet people from literally all around the world. The social scene really is big. Like, if you really put yourself out there, there's so many networking events, there's so many free events that you can go to just to meet people and get acquainted with people that are in the industry that you want to be in, or if you just want to make friends. So yeah, guys, that is all I have for the pros and cons. Now, in terms of whether I recommend you moving to New York City, it really just depends. If you want to be in a city where there's a lot going on, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of opportunities, especially if you want to be in entertainment, I say that New York City is a great place if you can afford it too. But I always say this, I've been here for 10 years, and to be honest with you, I don't know how much longer I'm gonna be here, because ultimately, whenever I meet my future husband, which I don't know when that will be, I want to have kids, I want to have a family, and I don't want to raise my family here. And it's nothing against New York City, but it's just the fact that it's just so expensive. Having to raise a child here, it's just even more expensive. And also, like, just the craziness of New York City. It's just not something that I would want for my kids because it's hard out here. So yeah, eventually I do want to move out of New York City. I just don't really know when. I'm kind of just praying about that and letting God lead me in that, because I don't want to move somewhere like in a haste. Like, I want to make sure that I'm prepared and I want to make sure that it's the right decision. But overall, I am thankful that I do live in New York just because of everything that I've experienced, all the people that I've met, all the opportunities that I've had. And it's also like forced me to grow a thick skin. Coming from Connecticut, I was always like timid and shy, like unsure of myself and insecure. But being here, I've learned how to like defend myself, how to stand up for myself, how to speak my truth, how to come out of my shell, and how to really like just be outgoing and just be myself and not be ashamed of who I am. I think that's because of, like I said, the diversity here and how everyone is welcomed. It doesn't matter your race, your color, your culture, your sexual orientation. Everyone is welcome in New York City. So yeah, so those are my 2 cents about New York City, and I want to thank you guys so much for watching if you made it to the end of the video, and I will see you guys next time.